from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, and I'm happy to be here with you guys. The phone number, if you want to join us, it's 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And tensions continue to rise in the Middle East with all sorts of antagonistic activity from Iran towards Israel. And we're going to get a whole conversation going with retired Marine Corps Colonel in a little bit. I also want to get into some conversation on what is going on with this debate. To me, J.D. Vance, winner by knockout, right? I think he really scored on this one. We're going to get a take on that from a former White House Deputy Press Secretary. And we're also going to have some conversation in a little bit, of course, on what is going on with the hypocrisy. Kamala Harris failed to make it to the disaster-stricken, hurricane-ravaged areas of multiple southern states, North Carolina, Georgia, etc. And why? Because she was busy raising, I don't know, I think it was somewhere between $30 and $55 million from her donors. And, you know, Hollywood donors, big names in Hollywood. And I'm guessing she flew there on a government plane, and probably half of her guests were probably there on private planes. And it makes me wonder, why is it that we never hear the left? We never hear AOC. We never hear, All Out Crazy. We never hear Kamala Harris. We never hear anybody on the left screaming at the top of their lungs about shutting down private airports. They never want to shut down. Now, I'm not asking them to, but I'm saying you would think if they were so pro the environment, so pro doing the right thing, that maybe they would say, you know what, instead of us flying private whenever we need to fly and get around like John Kerry, our climate czar, right? Maybe, just maybe, we could all fly with everybody else in coach, in business class, heck, even in first class, but get on the plane with the regular folks. But you never hear them, right? I've never heard anybody on the left say, we got to shut down private airports. I've never heard Kamala Harris or Governor Tim Walz say, no more private airports. I live in Bergen County, New Jersey. It's about 4 or 5 miles away from Times Square, Manhattan, right? Pretty close. And the closest airport to me is a small airport called Teterboro Airport. Nothing but private planes there. Small private aviation. And I just think to myself, I can't remember a time where I've ever heard anyone on the left say, we need to limit this. And again, I'm not calling for that. I've never flown out of Teterboro. I don't have that kind of money. I wish I did. And maybe one day I will. But my thinking is, we don't hear it. You know why? Because of the hypocrisy that's on the left. So we're going to talk about that with somebody who's a former EPA team member for the Trump transition team. And there's a lot going on in the news, right? Middle East, debates, all of that stuff. But something I want to get into is the hurricane. I was at breakfast today with my brother, and he tells me, I don't hear the mainstream media talking about this hurricane. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, that's because I think the majority of it passed, and, there's all these other tensions in the Middle East. But his contention was, no, it's because they're too busy bashing Trump. And all they want to do is bash Trump. And I thought, well, maybe you have a point. Maybe that is all they want to do is bash Trump. Is that, in effect, what's going on? Are they too busy bashing Trump that they're uninterested in talking about this natural disaster? Is it because the natural disaster doesn't bode well for Democrats? Is it one more disaster they don't need? Right? They have a disastrous economy, a disastrous border, and now a natural disaster in several southern states that might go for Trump. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Maybe my tinfoil hat is wrapped too tightly. I don't know. But I found it interesting because I thought I was hearing a fair amount about the hurricane in the news. I didn't feel like it was being suppressed, but I made a point of it. And he texted me, I don't know, several hours later and said, hey, I've been watching for an hour and a half. I told him, watch CNN. You'll hear about it. I guess he watched CNN or MSNBC and texted me saying, haven't heard a mention of it yet. So, I don't know. Maybe when you guys call in later on and you join the program, 833-4-VALDEZ, you can let me know. Is it accurate? Is the mainstream media suppressing the growing death toll of Hurricane Helene, the fallout of Hurricane Helene? He was also telling me, look, he's a real estate broker, commercial real estate broker, and he tells me, I'm looking at these videos that are coming out of the disaster areas, and what I'm looking at looks like a war zone. I'm seeing buildings that are flattened. He said this isn't a couple of people in the dark because of a blackout or a couple of people that lost a roof. He said this is massive, and he said to hear that only 100 people died sounds fake, phony, and fraud to me. And I thought maybe you're onto something, because I had a guest last night who said that they dropped off 3 times the amount of body bags just yesterday. So what is going on? Well, obviously the death toll is likely to go up as more and more of the relief efforts continue. But it does beg the question, is our government being forthright here? And are they being conscientious and diligent in their effort to do the right thing in every instance? We've seen so much of the Biden administration really failing at various levels of government that for me, it begs the question, are they doing the right thing? I don't know. I don't want to intentionally cast aspersions. I don't mind doing that unintentionally, right? If I say something that, causes you to doubt them, hey, that's on you. But I'm not trying to doubt them. I'm really trying to be inquisitive here. I'm really trying to ask a question. I don't know, right? It's a real, I feel stumped by this. I don't know. I also haven't heard a lot about the port strike. So maybe we'll hear about that, and we'll see. Somebody told me as soon as that port strike goes into effect on October 1st, the dollar is going to crash. And that's it. It'll be the end of the American economic system. And I said, I think you're out of your mind that this strike would just tank our economy. And guess what? I was right. Here we are 2 days into it, and we still have a dollar. So I knew that, and I'm somewhat tongue-in-cheek here, but come on. People have to stop going for every crazy thing that they hear on these very wacky websites. Anyway, we're going to continue our conversation. I want to get into some discussion on what is going on in the Middle East. And is this the beginning of World War III? We always hear talk about it, but is this actually going to be it? I don't know the answer, but we're going to find out straight ahead with our guest. So don't go anywhere. We have a retired Marine Corps Colonel joining us momentarily. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So today, Iran launched approximately 200 ballistic missiles at Israel in a reckless and brazen attack. I condemn this attack unequivocally. I'm clear-eyed. Iran is a destabilizing, dangerous force in the Middle East, and today's attack on Israel only further demonstrates that fact.
That is Vice President Kamala Harris, as I like to call her, and Kamala Harris on the campaign trail yesterday making those comments about Iran. One of the few times that we've ever heard her say anything about Iran, and now she says they're destabilizing. Not that they're terrorists that are trying to kill everybody and erase Israel off the map. So still not quite telling the truth, in my opinion, but a step in the right direction, I guess. And, of course, her comments and all of the actions by Tehran have been met with criticism, both from Netanyahu and from others. And one of those others is Ambassador Danny Dunn. Listen to this.
It was a calculated attack on a civilian population. Israel will not stand by in the face of such aggression. Israel will respond. Our response will be decisive. And yes, it will be painful.
All right, tough words there from Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Dunn. And he continued with a very stern warning declaring that the UN are persona non grata after calling for both sides to calm down, as if saying, you know, I'm allowed to get attacked and you want me to stand down. Listen to this.
Not mentioning Iran, not mentioning who is the aggressor, who is self-defending its people. That moral equation is detached from reality. And that's why we could not accept that.
And again, that is Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Dunn. And I want to get some reaction to this and really kind of war game this on the fly here to see if this is going to lead to an all-out war. Will this be the beginning of World War III? What does this entire relationship between Iran and China look like? How does it continue to materialize? What is the relationship with Iran and Russia and all the rest of the geopolitical factors? And I want to do that with retired Colonel William Dunn, United States Marine Corps. He's president of Strategic Resilience Group, and he's the author of an amazing book called Gunfighters Rule. Colonel Dunn, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I appreciate your time tonight.
You bet. So you've heard the comments from Vice President Harris and responses to both that situation that she was talking about, the initial attack of 181 ballistic missiles that was from yesterday, met with more today. And what's your initial take on this?
Well, the biggest challenge for Israel right now is they're in total war. They are fighting for their complete existence. The other entities, like Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran, they're in limited warfare. And that's why you're seeing this kind of tit-for-tat on the other entities, and Iran's using their proxies to fight their war for them. The biggest difference is, too, these proxies and terrorist groups are attacking civilians directly. What Israel does is before they take one of their strikes, they give a warning for all the civilians to leave. And I hope they continue to do that, because in Iran, the population of Iran is getting tired and does not want to be pulled into a war. President Trump had them almost bankrupt, and we believed militarily that their own country personnel would overthrow they would do their own regime change because they don't want war. Civilian population should never want war. And what you have is the leadership in Iran that's causing this war because of their hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. So what we did as a nation is, by giving them tremendous funds, we have allowed Iran to build up their weapons stockpile, to enrich uranium, trying to get to a nuclear weapon, which they've been talking openly about. And we've allowed them to wage war not only on Israel, but on our Marines, our sailors and soldiers and airmen that are deployed, not just in the Middle East, but really anywhere that they can threaten them, they're doing it. I don't know what the count is, but I believe it's over 200 attacks on U.S. military bases, and we've done virtually nothing. And that is criminal in my mind. If you allow an enemy to keep punching you and you do nothing back, there's no reason for them to stop. There's no risk. So we need to hold Iran at risk, and Israel will hold them at risk. And I believe in the coming days, maybe the coming weeks, they'll choose it at their own timing. They're going to strike. They're going to strike back hard, and they're going to strike back decisively. And I don't believe anyone in the U.S. should be telling them what they can and cannot strike.
Right. And folks, I just want to remind you, we're on with Colonel William Dunn, United States Marine Corps. And Colonel, it seems to me that we have an administration that claims to be pro-Israel, that claims to be supportive of our ally, our strongest ally in the Middle East, yet seems to take actions that are contrary to that. Is that a fair statement?
Well, what we don't know is what's happening behind the scenes, right? Now, I don't believe there's anything happening behind the scenes, but it's very logical to hope that our government would maybe work behind the scenes with another government to get an action that they would not state officially. So maybe they say openly do this, but behind closed doors they're saying do something else. I hope that's happening in this case. To me, it would be logical if we're saying, hey, Israel, don't blow up any nuclear weapons plants over in Iran, but behind closed doors we're saying do that. Now, I don't think our current regime has the guts or nerve to do that. So I think what you're seeing openly is what we're seeing, which is tragic. We have allowed Iran to become a bolstered enemy because we gave them the money to buy weapons and build a weapon arsenal that they're using. All of these systems are expensive. They take time to procure, and they take time to develop the capabilities to launch them effectively. Now, fortunately, our systems and the Israeli systems have prevented most of them from getting through. But if you don't act, there's no reason for them to not to keep shooting. The Houthis shot at some of our U.S. Navy ships. I remember the day when if you fired upon a U.S. flag ship, a U.S. flag vessel, there'd be retaliation. Now we're not doing it, so why do they need to stop? There's no reason for them to stop unless we take action. And any action's got to be decisive and make it too costly for whichever country, you name the country, to take action against U.S. forces, U.S. presence, or U.S. allies. It has to be more expensive to do that. And we're just not showing them that.
It makes a lot of sense to me. Colonel William Dunn, folks, is our guest, and he's president of Strategic Resilience Group. He started this company back in 2016 after he retired from a 33-year career in the United States Marine Corps, during which time he rose through the ranks from private through sergeant and second lieutenant straight to colonel. So we're going to continue our conversation with Colonel William Dunn straight ahead. And, of course, your calls. If you want to join the conversation, feel free. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ is the number. We're coming right back to continue our discussion on what's going on in the Middle East with retired Marine Corps Colonel William Dunn. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
If this council sits on its hands, what message will that send? I fear that silence and inaction will only invite the RRGC to repeat attacks like what we saw yesterday and on April 13th of this year, again and again and again.
That is the Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, United States Ambassador to the United Nations, addressing the UN Security Council, saying that action has to be taken against the IRGC. Now, this goes back to what we were just talking about with our guest, Colonel William Dunn, who said that he hopes that there is some back channel negotiating going on that's outside of the public purview, that hopefully is more retaliatory and a stern message to the IRGC. However, I think there's some doubt as to whether the current administration has the fortitude to pull that off. So I want to pick up there and get your reaction to Ambassador Greenfield's comments. Colonel Dunn.
Well, thank you. Yeah, her comments are spot on. You have to take decisive action against a threat. You can't wait for the threat to hit you, even though we've done that and we're allowing it to happen. And currently, right now, I have individuals that are in Iraq that work for our company supporting U.S. DOD. And for the last week, every day, they have been under threat. Rockets, they saw missiles and rockets coming in yesterday. They saw damage to one of their bases. Fortunately, none of the people were hurt. But so every day, my company is checking with our folks that are deployed, supporting DOD. And if my folks are at risk, all of our DOD personnel are at risk. We, the United States, need to take our own action and support Israel, because if we don't, as I mentioned earlier, they'll just keep doing it there's no risk. Now, what I would hope that Israel does is, Israel's intel is probably the most perfect intel that you can have, as witnessed by the pager attack, as witnessed by the walkie-talkie attack.
Right.
I suspect there's other of those attacks coming. And that took such great precision to pull off that if I was an enemy of Israel, I'd be terrified. I wouldn't be picking up my telephone. I wouldn't be picking up my pager if I had a pager. And as one of my Israeli friends told me, he was joking. He said, watch out picking up your remote for your TV, because they know where you live. So what I would hope is the outcome of Israel. And I would wish that the U.S. would do this, because we could easily do this for the threat that they've caused to us and to our service people. I would take out Iranian war-supporting infrastructure.
Like what?
I would focus, like ships,
airports,
airplanes, weapons factories, anything that makes weapons, launchers, missile launchers. I would focus on those. I would take out any radar systems they have, communication systems, and I would take out and focus only on the military.
Now, let me ask you, Colonel, why do you think they haven't done that yet? And I'm not saying they're making any missteps. Like you just said, they're inside their enemy's head big time, blowing up their, stuff that's in their pockets. But I'm thinking, why not go after some of the Iranian infrastructure, even Hezbollah's infrastructure?
Well, I think it's a matter of mass. So you have Hamas, Hezbollah. Hezbollah has 100,000 rockets and missiles that they could overwhelm Israel with. We don't know how many more, but there's probably in the thousands upon thousands of systems that Iran has. And the way that Israel has got to fight this battle is they have to hit the biggest threat first. Now, ironically, Iran is not the biggest threat the way that Iran has been engaging them. The way that Hamas engaged them was the most direct threat, and now Hezbollah is their second threat. So I think what they're doing is a campaign. Take out the terrorists that they have to, that are the closest to their citizens right now. Take them out first. Take out the communication of Hezbollah. Take out the leadership of Hezbollah. Now go after what ideally, without the leadership to come, is a army in disarray. That's what you're hoping. And then you take them out piecemeal. And then at some point, you're going to have to roll in and do your devastating attack on Iran. Now, it's interesting. One of the things I put in my book, Gunfighters Rule, when I was a forward air controller in Iraq, our unit, which was Lima Company 37, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, we took over the Ministry of Petroleum in Baghdad. It's a giant building. In that building, everybody had already left by the time the Marines got there, but we cleared that building. In one of the offices, a beautiful office, right? Think of a giant CEO in the United States, beautiful office. But then there was a library, and on that library, I just grabbed a book off the shelf. Just ironically, it was called The Samson Option. And I pulled that book up and read it, and that was a book of Israel's plan if during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, if that went bad for them. I don't know if the book was a historical fiction, right? But it was talking about Israel's plan to use nuclear weapons on Baghdad. Now, it didn't come to fruition, and I've always believed that part of the U.S. push into Iraq was more for Israeli weapons of mass destruction to prevent their use for their survival than it was for Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. So I think if there was no other choice, I think it's a reasonable solution. If they still call it the Samson option, I don't know. Maybe they do. But the Samson option could be a realistic option for Iran if it gets to that point. Now, we pray to God that it never gets there. We do not want any country to ever cross the nuclear threshold in our lifetime or our children or grandchildren's lifetime, because that is when you start, that thing that we're talking about is World War III. That would probably jump us right into it. So I hope it stays conventional. I believe there are plenty of targets that Israel could wipe off the chessboard without breaking out of conventional warfare, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, me too. Hope so. All right, let's hope for the best here. Folks, we are on with retired Marine Corps Colonel William Dunn, president of Strategic Resilience Group. He's spent 33 years in the United States Marine Corps. He's a private contractor now, as he mentioned, has guys still on the ground in Iraq. And we're going to continue our conversation with him straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Colonel William Dunn, president of Strategic Resilience Group, author of the book Gunfighters Rule. And I want to go to your calls because I know we have a caller with a question for Colonel Dunn. Let's go to John in Vero Beach. What are the call letters there?
Yes, it's me.
WTTB. Go right ahead.
Yes, hi, Rich. I'm so proud of you and the Officer Dunn. God bless you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that this attack by Iran to try to kill our president-elect and any of our hierarchy in our country is a direct. That's an act of war from Iran. That's an act of war. And the longer we sit back and do nothing, it just emboldens not only them, but their co-conspirators, China and Russia. And we need to act on that. We need to engage with Israel against Iran and deal a devastating blow and knock out their ports, knock out their ability to sell or transport oil. We need to knock out these, no matter how deeply it's ensconced, we have to completely obliterate their nuclear program.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. No argument from me. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Colonel Dunn, your thoughts on Iran's involvement? They've made some threats in the past on President Trump's life, on former Secretary Pompeo's life. Do you know something more than the rest of us that perhaps Iran was involved in these latest attempts?
It's hard to say if they were. I believe, one thing I personally believe, that neither one of these individuals acted completely alone.
Of course.
That's all we're hearing is that it was just completely alone. But, I just don't believe that. The guy in Pennsylvania seemed just like an idiot. a useful idiot probably. So was somebody handling him potentially? I don't know that we'll ever know the answer for that. The Florida guy, I believe, he had already written letters to Iran. I believe that the simple fact that the Department of Justice put his manifesto out there so that other nut jobs could see that and see this alleged reward that he'll never pay anybody. But that's the incident that takes place that can cause destabilization in a nation. I agree with the caller. If you attack our president, if you attack our elected officials, there's got to be a price for that. We have very special warriors that nobody is immune from their reach, that we could go and take action. And I'm not talking, the U.S. has a policy of not doing assassinations, but we do have the ability to impact things in assets that people can readily know are a direct result from their action. For existence, take out 10 jets or 20 jets for an action that a country does on the United States. We could easily do that. Of course, that's an act of war, but you have to make the result so decisive that nobody wants to attack us again. Years ago, I met a Danish pilot, and he was in the United States doing some training. And so I just had a quick chat with him, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about the U.S.?" And he paused for a second, and he looked at me, and he said, "The U.S. is dangerous." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If somebody threatens you, you take decisive action." So in our mind, it's, America's scary in that if somebody threatens you, you could plummet us into another war. And that was a compliment.
Right.
Right now, we are not seen as dangerous. And if you remember, the red lines that we've drawn in the sand and then people crossed and we did nothing about that. And then we just moved the red line back and we moved the red line forward. And, if you cross this red line and then they cross that red line. Well, Iran is crossing every red line. And we have to be bold and decisive. Senator Cotton made a comment that you can't win a war on the defense. Well, you cannot. You can't do it. We have to do something. We have the best military in the world. Our men and women, they know what to do. They know how to do it. And they can get in and do things decisively without, there's always a threat of civilian casualties, right? There's no doubt about that. But reducing civilian casualties. The enemies of the United States do not care about civilian casualties. And that's what America needs to understand. They don't care. What I would do if I happen to be the president and Hamas was holding 4 or 6 Americans, I would tell them, if I don't have them back by Friday unharmed, every single day you're going to lose something. And that something may be rocket launches or something. And I'm going to say every single day you're going to lose something until we get our people back. And if you kill one of them, then the gloves are off. We cannot negotiate with these people. I believe, unfortunately, some of our Americans do not understand the hatred these people have for us, not because Republican or Democrat, not because of your religion, but just because you're an American. And they hate you for that, and they will kill you for that, and they want to kill us for that. People don't understand that, and that is why we're so divisive right now in this country. It's so divided is because they don't see it. I saw an ad the other day that said, "I wish we were together like we were on 9/12, right after 9/11." I hope we don't have to have another 9/12 because we have a big terrorist attack here. But I will tell you, the folks that I'm talking to are worried about that.
I bet. It's a definite consideration, and the current administration, in my opinion, hasn't done anything to help us come across as strong or respected on the world stage. Colonel, outstanding insight from you. For people that want to get a copy of your book, and I recommend they get a copy for themselves and one to give away, how do they get a copy of Gunfighters Rule?
Oh, well, thank you. It's very easy. It's on Barnes & Noble. You can just log into Barnes & Noble and find it, but probably the easiest way is right on Amazon. Just go to Amazon, Google Gunfighters Rule, and it's right there.
Gunfighters
and I think
Rule
you'll enjoy
is the book. Yeah, and what's the website for anything related to you?
Our website is srgadaptive.com, and soon there'll be a website for the book. They're pulling that together now, and I think it'll be just gunfightersrule.com, but that'll be coming. And just a little knowledge, the reason the book's Gunfighters Rule is because I was the commanding officer of HMLA 369, the Gunfighters, while I was in Iraq. And so that was one of my huge goals and dreams, is to command a gun squadron in combat, and I was one of the lucky few that got to do that. And we went over there, took it to the enemy, and we brought everybody, every Marine and sailor came home, and all of our aircraft made it back. So it was a great tour. Great men and women supporting this nation.
It was a real win. Well, I want to thank you for being with us, sir. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I appreciate it. Godspeed.
Well, yes, sir, and thank you very much for your time, and I hope all your listeners have a great evening. Hoorah.
Likewise. We'll do it again. Amen. All right, folks, we're coming back. Your thoughts, your calls, and a couple of more things to discuss. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, it's important that the United States support Israel to defend against missile attacks, but that's defense, and you can't win wars on the defense. And Israel is in a multi-front war against Iran and its Ring of Fire. Now, yesterday, the veil dropped when Iran attacked Israel for the second time this year directly. But Hamas is backed by Iran. Hezbollah is fully backed by Iran. Iran has a terror army in Yemen that's shooting missiles at Israel. Israel, though, has a chance, after its accomplishments against Hezbollah in the last 3 weeks, to totally remake the strategic map in the Middle East. Hezbollah has over 100,000 missiles and rockets. That's been like a loaded gun pointed at Israel's head for years. That's been Iran's main deterrent. But because Israel so thoroughly penetrated Hezbollah, because it's decapitated Hezbollah's leadership, now, by some reports, it's destroyed over half of that arsenal. It has a chance to totally expose Iran on its flanks. The United States needs to back Israel to the hilt. That's the opposite of what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done for the last year, putting more pressure on Israel than they do on Iran's terror network.
All right, amigos. That is Senator Tom Cotton, and letting us know where he stands, not mincing any words. And I think the message is clear, whether it's Senator Cotton in that clip or what we just discussed with Colonel Dunn. This is something we can't sit here and make jokes about it. Israel's paying the price right now because of the lack of leadership in Washington. It's my belief. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that think that we shouldn't be involved in any foreign wars and we shouldn't have allies and we should just worry about the southern border and whatever happens in the rest of the world, let people figure it out. I've never subscribed to that type of thinking. Sorry to disappoint. I believe the United States has a role on the world stage, and we have to fulfill that role. Anyway, folks, we're going to continue our conversation. We've got a lot more coming up straight ahead. Your calls and more coming up in the third hour. Plus, in the second hour, we've got discussion on the winner of the debate, J.D. Vance, and everything that happened there. Plus, the hypocrisy of the left and their junk science. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you this Wednesday night. Of course, our phone number, if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, here it is, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And there's some new developments with the Jack Smith case. I'm going to get to that in a moment. Of course, things continue to move forward with the areas struck by Hurricane Helene, but probably not quickly enough. And the winner, hands down winner, in my opinion, Senator J.D. Vance, the winner of last night's debate versus Governor Tim Walz, both vice presidential candidates squared off. And despite all of the drama, despite the mic muting, despite the on-the-spot fact-checking that they weren't supposed to be doing, and their correction by the senator, despite all that, I think he still nailed it. And there are some snap polls that came out right afterwards regarding the debates, and some of that reaction actually came from CNN, and I was kind of shocked. I shouldn't say shocked, but surprised, somewhat surprised to hear how CNN, even they agreed that Vance won the debate. Check this out.
I think there was a clear lack of preparation and execution here on Walz's part.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think he had too much preparation.
Maybe, yeah.
He had so many lines that he was clearly trying to say that he didn't listen and said when J.D. Vance said one of the many things he really hit Kamala Harris on, not Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris, he didn't respond because he clearly had things in his mind. I think the lack of interviews that he has done with national media, with local media, it showed. He needed more reps.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, J.D. Vance is much more experienced.
J.D. Vance is much more. That was Anderson Cooper having to say things I think he didn't want to say. But some of the polls that came out, multiple polls, showed that the debate viewers were kind of split on this whole issue. But the CNN poll showed a 51-49 majority in favor of Vance doing a better job in the debates. Let me see. CNN also said that their poll was about 5 points more Democrat-leaning than the national registered voter population. So think of that, 51-49, and they oversampled by 5 points there. The survey also found that those who watched the debate, only 1% said it changed their minds about who they were going to vote for. 13% said it made them reconsider who they would support, but didn't change their minds. And the vast majority of debate viewers, 86%, said it would not affect their choice for president. Then there was a CBS YouGov poll, and they said that it was a split between who won. Vance was narrowly viewed as the winner over Walz with 42 to 41% of the CBS YouGov poll, while 17% believed that the debate was a tie. So sounds like it's rigged to me. I want to get to the bottom of this with our guest, Hogan Gidley, former press secretary at the White House during the Trump years, former national press secretary for the Trump 2020 campaign. Hogan Gidley, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Rich, thanks for having me on. I always appreciate the time.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. I know you're going at it all day long, and it's late, so definitely appreciate it, and the listeners love you. Let's talk about these polls. I'm guessing you and I probably share an opinion that J.D. Vance nailed this thing last night, but do you find it somewhat surprising that even the CBS and CNN polls were favoring J.D. Vance?
A little bit, and I think had the media not tried to make J.D. Vance into an ogre, into a woman-hating, caricature of who he actually is at his heart and who he is as a person, it probably would have been split even bigger, and he'd had a larger win. Listen, you're still voting for the top of the ticket. This is still about Donald Trump's policies, right. America first. that have been proven to make your lives better versus Kamala Harris, who's implemented radical leftist failed policies that have made our lives worse. But when you're talking about elections that are decided by 40,000 votes across 3 states, every little bit matters. And what the media has done since the announcement of J.D. Vance is try to paint this guy as some type of crazy person, wild and angry, unhinged. And I think a lot of people who tuned into that debate were shocked to find out, wait a minute, this is a guy from the Midwest who had a mother who was an addict, was raised by his grandmother, struggled his entire life to make ends meet, had to make difficult decisions like so many of us do every single day on food and gas and medical bills, gets off out of his town and goes into the military, and then GI Bill, goes to college, gets into Yale with no contacts, no big last name like Bush or Cheney or Kennedy, and basically is self-made. Of course, he had some help along the way, as many of us do, but my gosh, people saw that and went, wait a minute, this isn't what the media told us this guy was. And why that matters is because as he went through that debate and he related to people and he talked about the importance of the policies, but also the compassion he showed to Tim Walz when he said his son had seen a shooting, and he just paused and said, Tim, I can't believe it. The compassion he showed, the charm he showed, the charisma he showed, it really flew in the face. So it did a couple things. It showed the media again for being in the tank for Democrats and a bunch of liars, but it also showed the vice presidential pick says a lot about the person at the top of the ticket and their ability to make good decisions. Donald Trump made a good decision, even when a lot of folks on the right said, it's okay, but we need to do better, and I don't think JD is the right person. Now, all of a sudden, yet again, Donald Trump's been proven to be correct.
Yeah, no question. Trump knows how to pick winners, and I agree with you. Folks, we're on with Hogan Gidley, former principal deputy press secretary in the White House during the Trump years, former national press secretary for Trump's 2020 campaign. And Hogan Gidley, I think I'm in total agreement with you on everything that was going on, and I did not. I was not surprised. I was not shocked to see that they said, look, we're not going to fact check you guys. And they went ahead and fact checked J.D. Vance and then turned his mic off. What'd you think about that?
Oh, look, I was kind of disappointed. If you're a moderator, the one thing you don't want to do is be the story. Now, they weren't the story in this one like the ABC moderators were, which is completely shameless. But this group, and I know them both well, actually, they completely were in the tank for Walz, and they did a couple things. They would do things to J.D. Vance like, Donald Trump said this. Do you agree with this thing Donald Trump said? But they never asked Tim Walz, hey, Kamala Harris has this position of pushing for illegal aliens in prison to get free sex change operations. Do you agree with that? They didn't make him answer for any of Kamala Harris's crazy radical words or her policies, in large part because, they're trying to cover for her. But also they would say things to Tim Walz and say, J.D. Vance would give an answer, and then they'd say, Governor Walz, do you want to respond to what J.D. Vance said about XYZ? Like they would give him kind of the multiple choice, like, here's where the opening is, Tim, please go after J.D. here. And then, of course, they stepped in and tried to fact-check J.D. Vance, and J.D. shut him down immediately and basically corrected their incorrect words and incorrect facts with real information, real data, real statistics, and they cut his mic off for it. So he put on a master class of how to push back on the media, and one of the ways and reasons he's able to do that is because they don't bubble wrap him and keep him in a basement. They let him get out there and mix it up with press people. I mean, Walz has been doing this now. He's a 6-term congressman. He was in been a governor for 2 terms. He's been doing this for 20 plus years. J.D. Vance has been doing it for 2 years. But the practice and the repetition gives J.D. Vance the complete edge because he's used to doing this. He's not afraid to get out in front of the media, and it showed last night.
Yeah, I think it also matters that he was honest, right? J.D. Vance, they said, hey, look, you trashed Trump way back when. And he was owned up to that and said, yeah, I did, and here's why, and this is how I changed my opinion on it and whatever. And Governor Walz, they were like, hey, you said this. What's the story with that? And he stumbled, fumbled, and really couldn't come up with an answer. He just couldn't own his mistake. And I think that cost him, in my opinion.
I'm so glad you said that part because, interestingly enough, the J.D. Vance story, and I've been on TV and talked about this on your show, talking about it, and they say, how could you support someone like J.D. because he was so never Trump? And I said, but don't you understand what a good messenger that makes him?
Yeah.
He can go into suburbia and say, hey, men, women, independents, I was like you. I thought there's no way I could support this guy. I thought he was wrong for the country. Then I got to know him. Then I got to see his policies impact our lives to the better. And I realized that's what it's all about. He's the perfect spokesperson for that. And oddly enough, you have someone like Walz, they try to make into this, Midwestern nice, flannel wearing everyman. And he's clearly not. He lied multiple times throughout this campaign about his military service, his rank in the military, lied about getting some award from the Chamber of Commerce he never got, lied about all kinds of things. Where was he in China during the Tiananmen Square disaster?
He seemed to not know.
That's like saying, Rich, that's like saying, hey, I was in Lower Manhattan on 9/11. Oh, wait, you're right. I'm sorry. I wasn't. I was in Target in Columbia, South Carolina. Like, you don't just mistake that. So he clearly is embellishing a lot of his stories, and he got called on it, and you saw he got trapped. His face turned red. He didn't know what to say. And, again, that goes back to not being vetted because they're just so used to having the media do their bidding, the left, the members of the Democrat Party. And so it was just a really fascinating dynamic between the two. I thought J.D. did an outstanding job, and it looked like Walz was in over his head.
It sure did. Folks, we're on with Hogan Gidley, former deputy principal press secretary in the Trump administration, and we're going to come right back and continue this conversation with Hogan Gidley. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
We did this debate, and then I talked to the president afterwards, and we talked a little bit about, what actually happened, and, some of the points that I made, some of the points that Governor Walz made, and he made this observation. He said that Tim Walz said that he was friends with school shooters twice. And that's something I actually didn't notice, that Tim Walz had said that on the debate stage. And I said, did he really say that, sir? And he said, I'm telling you, man, go and watch the clips. He said he was friends with school shooters twice. And I said that was probably only the third or fourth dumbest comment Tim Walz made that night then. Because look, I got to be honest, I feel a little bad for Governor Walz. And the reason I feel bad for him is because he has to defend the indefensible, and that is the record of Kamala Harris.
That, of course, Senator Vance earlier today sharing his thoughts on the debate yesterday and being somewhat amused. He's a really cheerful guy. He doesn't seem to get bent out of shape, which is like a superpower. I want to come back to our guest, Hogan Gidley, rock star when it comes to this stuff, former principal deputy press secretary in the Trump administration, national press secretary for the 2020 campaign. You see him on TV all the time. Hogan Gidley, what do you make of Senator Vance's comments here?
Look, I think his assessment is absolutely correct because the problem here is the American people have been living under a failed policy, a failed presidency for the last 4 years. JD did a really good job exposing the fact that Tim Walz is up there with no net and no record to point to of any success. Nothing they've done the American people like. I get asked all the time, what do you think about Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary? And I say, well, I'll be honest, she didn't have anything to work with. I said, at least when Donald Trump was in the White House, we could say, look at how great we're doing with the economy. Look at how the southern border's closed. Look at, there aren't any wars breaking out all over the world. She can't do that, and neither could Tim Walz. All he did was talk about Trump. He couldn't talk about Kamala Harris's successes. There aren't any. And the best parts of those debates, to me, really kind of come down to when JD would point out the fact, you're the vice president now. If she can do all these things and has these great ideas, why not do them right now? Because if you could fix the southern border, if you could fix the high prices for gas and for groceries, if you could stop Iran from firing rockets into Israel or Russia from advancing on Ukraine, and you're not doing it, then that's just cruel, isn't it? I mean, so one of two things is true. Either she can't do it or she won't do it. Either way, the American people are left to suffer. And I think JD did a great job exposing that last night.
Yeah, amen to that. Now, Hogan Gidley, I want to just get a couple of hot takes on you in the minute or two that we have remaining. What do you think is? Do you think there's an October surprise coming our way? Do you think that they have anything else up their sleeves? To me, it seems that they're running out of steam. The other side, I think Trump's policies are superior. His performance is superior. His running mate is superior. I don't see how they, other than more lies, how they tighten up.
They'll do some other things probably in the legal space between now and then. You're seeing some stuff with Jack Smith kind of floating around, right? But listen, with the race the way it is, and you read some of the numbers at the beginning, about 86% really didn't have their mind changed by that debate. But that still means, what's that, 14%, can't have their mind changed out there. But I think so many are entrenched with Kamala, so many are entrenched with Trump. It could be an outside force, like a flood from a hurricane and a slow response from the federal government. They're still trying to play catch up. It could be the dock workers that strike, that hurt American families, with billions of dollars every single day that aren't coming into our economy and goods and services we're not getting. It could be a war in Israel right now with Iran kind of showing their muscle because of feckless, weak, failed foreign policy from the Biden administration. So a lot of factors could play into kind of tipping the scales here at the last minute. And you never know. I mean, these are the types of things that as you get closer and closer to this time, we really got to focus in and get the people out there to go vote, because there will be a lot of stuff they try to throw at you here at the last minute.
Yeah, everything but the kitchen sink. Hogan Gidley, let everybody know how they find you, your Twitter handle.
Find me on Instagram, all the socials, True Social, at @JHoganGidley, at @JHoganGidley. A lot of stuff going on all the social media all the time, so join me if you can.
Thanks, brother. We'll be right back.
My hands across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Nobody can deny the impact of climate crisis anymore. At least I hope they don't. They must be brain dead if they do. Scientists report that with warming oceans powering more intense rains, storms like Helene are getting stronger and stronger. Not going to get less. They're going to get stronger. Today in North Carolina, I saw the impacts of that fury.
Yes, you may have forgotten whose voice that is, but that is Joel Barboso Biden. And Joel Barboso Biden's talking about the fury of climate change. And listen, of course, it is devastating what happened with this storm. But I find it so interesting that there's all this hysteria around the climate change agenda that they continue to push, which in my opinion is an economic agenda, and they continue pushing it nonetheless. And it also is interesting to me, and I mentioned this at the top of the show, how Kamala Harris, the vice president, that she, instead of responding to this, right, Trump hit the ground running. I think on Monday he was already on deck in Georgia, and with a gasoline tanker in tow and several semi-trucks in tow, bringing supplies, water, etc. And Kamala Harris was still in California, right, over from her fundraiser where she was over the weekend, and Joe Biden spent the weekend at the beach. And I'm thinking, there's a lot of flying going on around here. Yet, Trump was flying too, but he was flying to the disaster zone. I think Kamala Harris was hosting a party where people were flying to this party. And it makes me think, why is it that the left never calls for the closure of private airports where all the private jets go? Seems like they like those. It's kind of like rules for thee, but not for me. Anyway, I want to get some thoughts on what's going on from our guest, Steve Milloy. You know him from junkscience.com. He is a Trump transition member, EPA team member, and he's an attorney, senior fellow at the E&E Legal. Let me just make sure I said that right. And he knows what's going on with this stuff. Steve Milloy, welcome back.
Hey, Rich, thanks for having me back. It's great to be here.
You bet. So I'm looking at this piece in Fox News, and it says Harris drops millions on private jet spending despite calling climate change an existential threat. And then all her friends are doing the same thing to go to her big fancy LA fundraiser. What's going on here?
Well, it's beyond hypocrisy. It's almost not worth mentioning. You mentioned earlier you thought climate was an economic issue. I think it's a political one. They push climate as a means of gaining power. They think it works for them. Of course, I don't think it does at all. I think most people think it's a ridiculous issue. But they've invested so much in it, and they've gotten these huge laws passed, like the Inflation Reduction Act, where there's $369 billion available to be spent on this. So I guess that's the economic part. But they're just so invested in it, and they don't really believe any of this stuff, because if they did, well, they would stop flying. They would reduce their, energy use and give up their money, because, rich people have larger carbon footprint. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's a con. The whole thing is a con, and it's meant to ensnare us. There are several agendas going on with climate. There's an economic one, there's a political one, and you got an international aspect. China wants to use climate to become the lone global superpower, get us addicted to Chinese energy, and then control us that way. So there's a lot going on. It's a fascinating issue. Nothing to it scientifically, but they can't pass it up. I mean, yesterday at the vice presidential debate, it was the second question they asked about. I mean, we've got immigration crises. We've got a strike now with the dock workers on the East Coast. There's Ukraine. There's what's going on in Israel. There's just like so many different things going on, and they're talking about climate, and not helping the people in in Appalachia who have been hit by the storm, but they're talking about climate change. I mean, it's a mental illness too.
Folks, we're on with Steve Milloy. And Steve Milloy, I think you're onto something here, and you're right. I think they use climate as a wedge to get political power and sway. I also think there's a lot of financial ramifications to it, and that's why I think it's economic, and it's probably a both and kind of thing. Yeah. But what do you think is the I feel, and maybe I'm totally wrong here, but I feel like more and more people are starting to see through this climate stuff, or am I wrong? Is that my own naivete, or more and more people actually buying into it?
Well, I guess, it really all depends on what side of the political spectrum you're on. The last poll I saw among Trump supporters, climate has zero support. Just goose egg.
Surprise.
Among Democrat voters, it's very popular. well, 16% prioritized. So it's not even really popular among Democrat voters. But I don't even know that it's their base that really cares about it. I mean, their base gets really energized by, say, abortion, but not climate. I mean, it's something that the elites are bought into. All the institutions, the government, Joe Biden, the top Democrats. Regular people just don't care. It just doesn't make sense to them. Even for the vast majority of Democrats, as I said, only 16% prioritize saving the planet. That tells you something.
Right. Folks, we're on with Steve Milloy. And Steve, I want you to stick with me. We're going to come right back and continue the conversation. And folks, of course, we're a little while away from open phones across America, where you get to weigh in on all the topics that we're discussing tonight. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right? That's right. But you're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Kamala Harris has said multiple times that climate change is a, quote, existential threat. Mm-hmm. But, Lauren, how much has she spent, and this is another, we've had this argument frequently, how much has she spent on private jets before becoming the Democrat nominee?
Since becoming the nominee. At least $3.8 million on private planes in less than 6 weeks. That's according to a Fox News digital review of filings that have been made to the Federal Election Commission. Look, it's obvious private planes are the most energy-intense form of travel. They're also convenient, which is why a lot of politicians take them. But when you are a politician and you say it is, quote, our duty and our obligation to treat the climate crisis as an existential threat, you might want to do as I do, not as I say.
That is Fox News Channel, Stuart Varney, Lauren Simonetti, talking about the controversy on the private jets of Kamala Harris. And again, Vice President Harris, her campaign spending millions of dollars on private jet flights since President Biden announced that he was no longer running for re-election. Harris, locked up the Democrat nomination, and she's been out there. Harris has been out on jet setting, if you will, while saying that this is an existential threat to humans. And this just calls into question so much of what they really, really stand for. And kudos to the Fox News Channel and those involved in the report for calling her out here. And what's worse, in my opinion, is when she's not on a private jet, she's on a public one called Air Force Two, and we're paying for all this stuff. Anyway, I want to welcome back our guest. Steve Milloy is a former Trump EPA transition team member and the founder of junkscience.com. Steve Milloy, is there any anticipation? Do we have any hope to think that there won't be hypocrisy related to these things, or is that just too much to hope for?
Well, I know people like to talk about the hypocrisy. I don't get so worked up about it because, to me, the big crime here is that the whole climate thing is a hoax. Mm. And I guess the hypocrisy is kind of evidence of that. John Kerry says, well, we're doing important work. We need to get around. Kamala Harris needs to use her private jet. John Kerry needs to fly everywhere. The whole thing is a hoax. We're being lied to. We are going into debt, national debt. People are, inflation was caused by, Joe Biden's war on fossil fuels. Electricity prices are going up. Food prices are going up. Car prices. Everything is becoming more expensive, and the climate hoax has a lot to do with it. So I'd rather focus on that. The first question, second question, yesterday's debate was, well, climate change has, caused these rains in Asheville, North Carolina. What would the Trump administration do about that? This is crazy. It's crazy talk.
Yeah, without a question. And do you think? I guess I'm kind of dumbfounded at the fact that this thing hasn't run out of steam yet. And I'm always thinking there's got to be at some point we're going to get somewhere where we go to the next big thing, and it's not just climate change. Kind of the way it went from global cooling to global warming, and then they just chalked it up at climate change. Is there a new trend on the horizon, or should we just expect to continue having the debate over the same tired stuff?
Well, Rich, there's, the Biden administration got this Inflation Reduction Act through Congress. It's got $369 million in cash and current spending for climate. Goldman Sachs has figured out that, these subsidies never really end, so we calculate at least $1.2 trillion worth of, so there's a lot of money. As you mentioned, your economic, there's a lot of money here. You got, the wind industry, the solar industry, the battery industry, the EV thieves, all these people, plus all the local government stuff. We're going into an election now, and there's been about $140 billion of this Inflation Reduction Act money spent already. Almost half of that money, almost $70 billion, has gone to 5 battleground states. So that's Joe Biden directing almost $70 billion to 5 battleground states. It's political walking around money, essentially. They're just buying votes.
Do you think this issue of fracking in Pennsylvania, do you think it's going to blow up in her face? I support fracking, I don't support fracking, or do they give her the benefit of the doubt and saying, that was a long time ago, but she's been on board with it since?
Well, that's a great question. It should blow up in her face, because when she says she's against fracking, she's not just against some, weird technology for getting oil out of rock. Fracking is responsible for 90% of U.S. oil and gas production at this point. Okay, so it's a major thing. It's not only the people in Pennsylvania that should be worried, it's people all over this country, because if fracking goes away and she doesn't have the power to ban it, but she does have the power to issue 1,000 rules that would de facto ban it. If fracking goes away, we are going to be in a world of hurt, because our entire civilization depends on fossil fuels. Yeah,
and I think that not enough thought goes into that when the left really starts hammering on that.
Yeah. No, and to me, it's like, these are not stupid people. They know that everything depends on fossil fuels, yet they maintain this, the climate hoax anyway. My response to that is, if you've ever read the book Animal Farm, when the pigs take over, the pigs promise all these different things, including a windmill, by the way, but none of it ever works out. But in the end, even though everything they've tried fails, the pigs remain in charge. And that's why I say this is a political, climate is really about politics. It's really about seizing control. It's about totalitarianism. These people have a vision for how the world should be run, and they plan to seize power of the economy and everything else so that they can implement it.
Steve Milloy, stick with me. When we come back, I want to get some of your final thoughts and let everybody know how they could find you and the work that you're doing. Folks, we're coming right back with Steve Milloy. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Wanted to ask you, there's a political ad on TV from a 2019 Climate Hall town meeting that you had, in which you basically said, quote, "There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking," unquote. The ad claims that if you're elected president, you will ban fracking and you will cost Pennsylvania over 300,000 jobs. Have you changed your view on fracking? And if so, why?
So let me start by saying that ad, as you described it, is absolutely a mischaracterization that I think is intended to make people afraid of my presidency. Let me be absolutely clear, as I've been when I said it back in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I did not as vice president. In fact, I cast the tie-breaking vote to open up more fracking leases.
All right, that is Kamala Harris on KDKA-TV in Pittsburgh, setting the record straight earlier today, and she's trying to double down on that. Of course, her boss, Joel Baboso Biden, he doubles down by saying that if you don't believe in climate change, you are brain dead. Unbelievable. I want to go to Steve Milloy. Steve Milloy, we've got Kamala Harris in Pittsburgh doubling down on this stuff because she knows that this could potentially cost her a lot in Pennsylvania. We just talked a little bit about that. Do you think this effort that she's, conducting now, this damage control, is it going to work?
Well, it all depends on where voters get their information from, right? If voters get their information from the lamestream media and that lie goes out, what she just said, well, that's, and if they believe that, well, that's, that might be how they vote. If you watch, conservative media, you're going to get a different message. You're going to find out she is, in fact, lying. Everything she and Biden have done have been against fossil fuels. They have done nothing for fossil fuels. When she mentioned that vote, she voted for more fracking. No, she didn't. I mean, that was part of a deal in the Inflation Reduction Act. None of that has come to fruition. None of it will ever come to fruition. There will be lawsuits about it. She didn't vote for anything. She voted for the $369 billion, $60 billion of which is now being spent in 5 battleground states to get her elected. So that's what she voted for.
Steve Milloy, I want you to take a moment and let everybody know the work that you're doing at junkscience.com and how they can find you, the E&E Institute, and everything else you're working on.
So you can follow me at my website, junkscience.com. I spend an awful lot of time on X. My handle is @junkscience. Or you can check out the Energy and Environment Legal Institute at eelegal.org. But most people follow me on X.
Outstanding. Folks, give him a follow on X. It's @junkscience. This guy knows what he's talking about, and he's funny at the same time. Steve Milloy, thanks for being with us, brother.
All right, Rich, thank you. Have a good night.
Take care. You too, man. God bless. And America, we're going to continue with your calls and more. Open Phone America comes up right now. And as you know, that's a time-honored tradition on this program where the late, great Jim Bohannon and Larry King before him invited callers from all across the country, and we've got affiliates all across the country, where you can call in and join our live late-night town hall conversation. And whether you want to talk about the issues we've been talking about all night or new ones that you want to bring up, either way, it's all good to me. Open Phone America starts right now, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez, coming right back.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national. Happy to take your calls in this third hour of the show. Open phones across America. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And we've talked about a bunch of things, right? We've talked about the potential for escalated conflict. There's already a bunch of conflict, but we've talked about the escalated conflict that is happening right now at the southern, at the southern border. That's happening too. But with Israel, with Iran and Iran's proxies. And I also want to talk about, or we did also talk about, the fallout of the debate at J.D. Vance cleaning the clock of Governor Tim Walz. And, of course, the hypocrisy around the climate change issue with Kamala Harris and what's happening in some of the swing states. Now, we can get into anything else you guys want to talk about, but I want to get your thoughts. So I want to start with a clip of audio with respect to the port strike, because this strike, again, it's in my nature. It's in my nature to call out the port strike and say, come on, it's not the end of the world. The economy didn't collapse. But it doesn't mean that things aren't going to get more expensive, right? Like I said, I have to fix something on my daughter's car, and I don't know if the parts are going to be readily available. And if I have to wait for them, it may be difficult, right? If they're coming in on a shipping container. And listen to this.
Are you worried that this
They had the capital to settle this thing.
Are you worried that this strike is going to hurt the everyday American, the farmers that need to reach the export market? They're telling me that they're going to hurt through all
Now you
of this.
start to realize who the longshoremen are, right?
Nobody cares.
People never gave a about us until now, when they finally realized that the chain is being broke now. Cars won't come in. Food won't come in. Clothing won't come in. You know how many people depend on our jobs? Half the world. And it's time for them and time for Washington to put so much pressure on them to take care of us, because we took care of them. And we're here 135 years and brought them where they are today, and they don't want to share.
All right. That is Harold Daggett. He's the president of the International Longshoremen's Association, the union that represents the port workers there. And as you could see, he's very angry. He just rejected a increase of 50% as they got close to the negotiating time frame, and that went out the window. I think the current demand is still 77% of an increase. Now, I think they're asking for this 77% increase, which I also would like. If anybody from Westwood One is listening right now, myself and, of course, everybody that works on this team from engineering to production, we'd all like a 77% increase. However, unless we get a 77% increase in listenership that's matched by a 77% increase in sponsorship, I'm going to say it's doubtful that we'll get 77% increase. Now, I think what they're doing is a political tactic known as the Overton window, right? You open something so big, you open the window so wide that when you finally do shut it, wherever you land at shutting it, it's still in the range of where you want it to land. And I think that's interesting, but obviously they want to land north of 50%, somewhere between 50 and 77. Now, is it about the money? Of course, right? There's an old saying, it's always about the money. And when it's not about the money, it's about the money. But the other big issue here is the automation stuff, right, that they're fighting against. But a couple of key points here. There's this article I'm looking at from yesterday, CNBC. There's a group that owns different ports, USMX. And they said that it made a offer 50%. We just talked about it. That was rejected. Now you got trucking companies and freight rail operators that are scrambling, that were, trying to move everything before the strike. Now they're frozen, right? Now there's not much they can do as we wait. And this is where we are. Now, you've heard estimates that this can cost as much as $14 billion a day. Some are saying $25 billion. It's just a lot, right? I honestly don't know how to quantify this. I don't know which numbers are accurate or not, and how you get these huge numbers. Some are saying it's a weekly number, some it's a daily number. The long and short of it is we just need to get this thing going. And just like the writers' strike, people don't want this automation. To me, that should be the simplest concession. Of course, the problem now is that people don't want their people to lose jobs. That is a big problem. And I understand that. Listen, as a radio host, I can tell you, if they said, look, we're a new contract and we're going to AI your voice, say what we want, just type it into, Chat Richie V, and boom, we get your voice saying whatever we want it to say. I don't want that. And, if it's good enough AI, you may not even be able to tell the difference other than, maybe some of my cadence, maybe kind of the way I think, and I might not say some of those things. So I totally get that. But based on the data from Import Genius, listen to this. They track bills of lading and the digital receipts of many of the cargo containers. A total of 54,456 20-foot equivalent units arrived last Friday at the 14 ports that are operating under this master contract. And so that's split between the International Longshoremen's Association and the U.S. Maritime Alliance, USMX. And that expired at midnight on Monday, right? So as of Tuesday, nothing's going on. We're in day 2 of this strike. And the approximate value of that freight was something like $2.7 billion based on the estimate that they came up with of $50,000 per container. And they're saying that for all the weekdays, at least between the last week before the strike, this totaled $13.6 billion in goods. So lots of goods. Nobody's saying the longshoremen aren't working. These shipping containers are huge. These containers are huge. The question is, will the people that are requiring the automation, will they bend? Will they be able to taper their expectation and say, all right, we'll use automation for this, but not for that? I don't know the answer to that, right? I know there's some radio stations nowadays that they can automate somebody that pre-records, like music radio stations. You can record shows way in advance and they'll play it when they want using automation. I guess that's a happy medium where you're still using some real voice talent. But I don't think there's any voice talent in the world that's going to say, you know what, sure, just take my voice, say what you want, and give me, unless the money's really good. I guess that might sway some people. But I think most people who do this stuff, especially talk show hosts, they enjoy what they're doing, right? I know I love this stuff. I love talking to you guys. So I don't know. I don't know where we land on this, but I hope that automation will not replace the jobs of many, many people, because ultimately people need to work. But I also understand, right? It's a double-edged sword. I also understand that back in the days when my mom used to watch The Honeymooners, right, with Audrey Meadows, Joyce Randolph, and Jackie Gleason, that they used this thing called an icebox. Right? And it was for all intent and purpose, I believe it was a wooden box with a huge slab of ice in it that slowly melted because it was so, concentrated and cold. And then you'd get another slab of ice. And that was your ice box. And then came electric refrigeration and replaced the guy who made the ice, the guy who delivered the ice, the route, maybe even the ice company in many ways, right? They probably didn't sell as much ice, so many of them probably went under and got bought out by larger ice companies and said, I'll do all the business for everybody. That's a reality of technology. It's a reality of evolution, if you will, right? As businesses mature and evolve and technology evolves. And that's happening here. So somebody's going to make that argument to me one day and say, look, there was a time when we needed talk show hosts, and now we don't need them. We have these generic AI voices. They say what we want them to say, and people love them. People think they're fantastic. Now, I don't think people think those are fantastic. I really don't. But I do see it happening, right? There are social media commercials that are AI. They've got these avatars that look pretty real. They do training videos now that are AI. They're not even real people. So I don't know. Where do we land on this? I want to get your opinions and thoughts on all of this stuff. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. I want you to weigh in on that. The conflict in Israel with Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as the climate change hoax that Kamala Harris is making a bunch of bank on. So your thoughts and more coming up with me, Rich Valdez, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez.
You are going to grind the economy to a halt here on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast.
No, not us. They are. Don't spin it now because you're Fox News. They're going to drive it.
That again, Harold, what's his last name? Daggett. Harold Daggett, president of the ILA, the International Longshoremen Association, the port union, and saying it's the dock owners that are going to be shutting down the economy because they won't agree, and these guys are on strike. And I want to get to your thoughts on all of this. Let's go to Lockwood, Nevada, KKOH. Blue, go right ahead.
Yeah, my neighbor goes to the ports in Oakland, and he said they're jamming them up, loading them up. He's working. He wasn't hardly even working, but a couple days a week at the ports in Oakland, and now he's working 6 days a week, having to leave here at 3 a.m, and he's gone all day. So I think they're trying to take it over here into California. You know, I mean, even if it's a longer way by boat and all that, they're taking over to try to take up some of the slack so that the shelves don't get empty, because they tell us that within 7 days of a strike, the shelves will be totally empty in all the stores.
Wow. Well, that's I haven't seen that happening yet. I hope it doesn't happen. I remember when the Teamsters had a similar strike, there were similar predictions, but the difference was the stuff was getting off the ships. Now it's not getting off the ships. So that could, in fact, become a very big problem, and I hope we get a resolution to this sooner rather than later. Where is Joe Biden on this? Where is Kamala Harris? I would not be surprised if you see Trump pulling up real soon, starting to negotiate with them, help cut a deal. And say, I'm saving the country again, folks, because these guys are asleep at the wheel. I'm going to be a beautiful deal, a huge deal. Absolutely terrific, believe me. Anyway, so yeah, I think that could be a thing. Blue in Lockwood, Nevada, thank you so much. KKOH, big shout out to you guys. And let us continue. Let's see. Frank, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC, go right ahead.
What we need in this case is strong presidential action. Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s at the Boston police strike said famously, there is no right to strike against the public welfare ever. And that led him to the presidency. Harry Truman ended the steel strike in the early 1950s by evoking Taft-Hartley. And Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers when they got out of line. When it affects the whole country, the president must act and end the strike immediately.
Yeah, listen, I totally agree with you. And that's exactly what I was saying. Where is Joe El Baboso Biden on this? Where is Kamala Harris? Why are they not leading? Why did they not prevent this from happening? Right? And some may argue and say, no, don't let the government get involved. Let them figure it out. But ultimately, that's why we have a government, right? To prevent anything that could harm the public. And this, to me, seems like something that's going to harm the public and potentially the overall economy. So I'm with you. We need serious presidential leadership here. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if El Trumpito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States, is the next one visiting the longshoremen saying, look, I appreciate you. We're going to make America great again. It's going to be huge. I totally see it happening. Let's see if my prediction is right or wrong. Frank in Cumberland, Maryland, thanks for the call, brother. Big shout out to WCBC. And let me see, where do we go next? We go to Sarah, Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Go right ahead.
Hey, I want to tell you have a great show about the longshoreman strike. Yes, don't get me wrong, unions can be corrupt, and they can protect gold diggers, and they vote Democratic, or the leadership always tries to get their members to vote Democratic. But at the same time, if they are, if they have an issue with AI and getting replaced by robots, I would stand with them. And if there's another way they can do this and get their grievances heard without, imperiling the nation's supply, I would be for that too. But AI and being replaced by robots is not inevitable. We make a choice, and if we go down that road, and more jobs get sucked up, people have to have jobs. And it's not healthy for people to be inactive and sit around. And plus, there's not a lot of working-class jobs left. So it is a valid concern. It's not inevitable. Look at the Amish. They said no to technology at a certain point, earlier point than we did, but they have controlled their culture, and in some ways are a lot healthier. So we can choose and decide. We don't have to accept AI replacing everybody. We can choose and decide and draw a line somewhere. So thank you.
Outstanding. Listen, Sarah, excellent analysis like always. I think you're spot on here. And this is exactly what we have to do. This is a national security issue. It's an economic issue. It's an issue that affects all Americans and everything in between, right? This is something that we have to fight for. And I'm with you. We need to, whatever has to be done to make sure people keep getting their toilet paper and we don't run out of items. And automation can be helpful, but we should not allow the machine generation to replace humanity. I think somebody has to be the watchdog of that, and I would love it if it were Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, although something tells me that they're probably on the other side of that argument. Sarah in Bedford, Indiana, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. Before you go, what were your thoughts on the debate last night? I just wanted to get your thoughts on Vance.
I missed it. I was at work, and I didn't get radio reception, and I was kind of short-handed, and I was just so busy working. I am really embarrassed to say that I missed this one, so I'm going to have to watch it online somewhere.
Well, yeah, you try and catch yesterday's show. We carried almost all of it after 10 p.m. On the show, so you can definitely hear the actual debate. I didn't interrupt it at all, except for when we had to do the commercials. But thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. And anybody who missed any of our shows, any of our interviews, go to the website, richvaldez.com. That's Valdez with an S at the end, richvaldez.com. And you can listen to any of your interviews. You could subscribe to the podcast. You could listen on demand. You can do whatever you want. And share it with a friend. Anyway, folks, we're coming right back. The rest of your calls and more. We got calls from California, Pennsylvania, Montana, Arkansas, Texas, and more. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
She has a 14-point lead, but it has been shrinking after each consecutive presidential election from 2016. Right. Why is that? Why is the Democratic share of the Latino vote shrinking?
And what I said to you when we asked the question was, Latinos want to be white. They want to be with the cool kids. They want to be, I'm asking Latinos all the time, and they just say, well, ese Donald Trump es tan buen negociante. He's such a good businessman. It's like, no, he's not. He had bankruptcies. But they don't want to be identified with all of those other immigrants that Donald Trump speaks so badly of, including me as a Mexican immigrant. So they're like, let's be with him. But those numbers, they could cost Kamala Harris the election. Everything that I've been saying that Latinos could push her over the top, these are the numbers that could also take her down.
That is Maria Hinojosa from NPR, and she's on MSNBC with Jonathan Capehart. And she said, you heard it, I didn't interrupt her because I wanted her to get it out. She said, because Latinos want to be white. Now, this is an age-old debate, right? But I'm going to say this. What language is it that we speak, right? Us Latinos, Hispanics. Ding, 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 you are correct, sir and madam. We speak Spanish. Now, for all of you who've been to Spain, you know that there's a whole lot of white people there. And Spain is in a place called Europe. So the predominant gene pool for most Hispanics, at one point or another, is the Spaniard European, right? The European Spaniard who goes colonizing places and voila, right? Whether it's in Central America, South America, in my situation, the Caribbean. And I would say I'm more of the exception to the rule because Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, even Cubans, while there's a ton of European influence from Spain, there was also the influence of the indigenous population, like, for example, the Taino Indians that are the native inhabitants of Puerto Rico. And, of course, the slave trade that came through there and a lot of people of color. But that it was never the dominant. I think most of the DNA samples that they've gotten from Puerto Rico are something 60-some-odd% Spanish European, a.k.a. white, if you will. Now, does that mean Latinos want to be white per se, like Anglo-Saxon? I would never think that. It's never occurred to me. I think most people I know, myself included, we really embrace our familial culture, right? I know I do. You know, there's days where I might go to the McDonald's drive-thru for breakfast, but most days I'm at a Spanish restaurant somewhere, ordering my food in Spanish, eating something. Today was a Cuban place. Yesterday was a Colombian place. So I don't know what this woman's talking about. You know, I really don't. I don't understand where she's coming from, but I'm going to say that most Hispanics tend to favor that direction, right? That's my take. So I think she's just fake, phony, and fraud, and I think what she was just trying to insult people and didn't realize how inaccurate she was while being accurate at the same time. Anyway, that's Maria Hinojosa trying to make everything a racial issue when it doesn't have to be. Now, I want to continue with your calls. I want to continue with your thoughts on what's going on with the with this debate and everything else that we've been talking about. Let's go to Big Tex. He's in Amarillo, Texas on KGYN. I didn't even know we were on that station. KGYN, shout out to you guys. Big Tex, go ahead.
Hey, Rich, listen, thanks for taking my call, man. I absolutely love your show. Thank you for telling the truth. Before I say what I need to say, I have to say the media, we're just living in an age of being gaslighted 24/7. And the main thing, or I'd say the most important thing to note that the media is lying to us about at the current time is that we're all not getting along. That is, to me, is the core of the most immediate threat, right? They're trying to tell us we're not all getting along. So I encourage everybody to do what I've been experimenting with lately. Go out, talk to your neighbors, not about politics. It doesn't matter for a minute when you're talking about them, just as a human being. Talk to the people across the counter from you at 7-Eleven. Talk to the people in line with you. You know, like, people need to know right now that we're not against each other. That is the biggest element of the gaslighting that they're telling us right now. Okay.
You know what? I want to agree with you on that. I'm going to agree with you because I think for the most part, and this is funny because I'm really on a few sides of this issue, but I really do believe that Most people want to do the right thing. I think most people tend to be honest, even though I oftentimes lose faith in humanity. I tend to put my faith in something higher, like God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, not in people, because ultimately I don't think we can really count on people. People are flawed and are going to fail us no matter what. But I agree with you that more people are for me than are against me. Anytime I've ever had a car problem when I was younger and I drove a hoopty and it would break, one time somebody threw something at my car and called me a derogatory racial slur. One time. A dozen other times or 10 other times, people got out of their cars, stopped what they were doing, and helped me push the car. Right? So I think, by and large, there is goodwill amongst people. And you're right, we do get along. Even if we're divided on issues, we get along. And I think a lot of it has to do with delivery. And looking at the debate last night was a good example of that. Tim Walz, in my opinion, is in the nicest way possible, he is a communist sympathizer. But look at how well him and J.D. Vance got along. They had a civil, cordial conversation where they disagreed agreeably. They spoke about their differences. And afterwards, it looked like they were really chumming it up and palling around. They seemed to really be enjoying each other's company. And I don't think there's a problem with that. I really don't. I've never subscribed to the idea that we have to hate the Democrats. We have to hate them. They're destroying the country. Yes, they're destroying the country. I hate the ideology. I hate what it stands for. But I support people's right to disagree with me. I have to support your right to be an idiot if you want to be one, right? Because you may think I'm an idiot. And most people do when I start telling them what I think and believe, right? Imagine what Maria Hinojosa would think of me, Tex. So I wanted to thank you for bringing up that point because I think it's an accurate one. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this show for that. You know, compassion. You can call a spade and have compassion to your fellow humans because they're being duped, you know? So we need to help them. And one thing I want to point out about the debate, okay, it was gaslighting central from Walz, right? So
for sure.
One thing I haven't heard people pointing out, though, he had a certain formula. Whenever he responded to Vance or whenever he got the floor, he had a certain formula, and it pretty much went exactly like this. J.D. Vance would say something awesome and totally be calm and cool about it and sincere. And then in a very insincere way, Tim Walz would say something that sounded like it was agreeable, but really wasn't when you thought about it. And then he would follow by just blatant gaslighting. But there's another element to the gaslighting people aren't really talking about. I think he noticed, obviously, they all do, how smart JD was, how well he could just,
sure.
just on the fly. He's there already. He's sincere. And I think the only strategy they have is not only to gaslight, but to rapid-fire ADHD level gaslight from one subject to another, to another, to another. He would not even take a breath before, like in my mind, just as a normal citizen listening and rooting for JD, I was in freedom. I was like, okay, Tim would start his reply, and I could hear Vance thinking because he's so cool, and I'd be like, man, he's thinking of a great reply to this because this is all gaslighting. And then as soon as I'd think that, Tim Walz would put a period on the end of a sentence real quick and immediately flip to something else, also gaslighting immediately, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the last thing I'd like to say, Rich, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be greedy. I say this as a recovering alcoholic and addict. Why is nobody asking what is Kamala Harris on? I don't say that to be mean. I say that as a recovering addict. She needs help. If I was not a recovering addict, I would walk and I saw someone.
I hear you. I think you're saying you've observed this because you've walked a day in those shoes and you're seeing something that looks familiar to you or eerily familiar. Let me go back to your previous point before we get to that one. This strategy, right? It's very typical of people in debate and in arguments and callers who want to disagree with me. I'll say, I think Trump's policy at the border was great. And they'll say, yeah, well, it's called whataboutism. in reality, right? What about how he disrupted the trade scenario that we had with China and got us into a trade war? What about how he's ignored X, Y, and Z and allowed what happened, set the stage for what happened with Ukraine and with Russia, right? And they'll continue their gaslighting that way. This is a very common strategy. They've been doing it forever and a day. It's whataboutism. You say one thing and they'll give you 4 whatabouts that you apparently didn't do well on in their mind. And the debate is always about who's watching. It's never about what you say to me or what I say to you. It's always about who looks better saying what they're saying, delivering their rhetoric in front of the audience. And Democrats know this, and this is why they're able to do it. Nancy Pelosi, look, she's like 800 years old, right? But guess what? When she has to turn it on, just like Joe Biden, right? Another one, 4,000 years old. But when he has to turn it on, he knows what to say. I mean, lately he really hasn't been good at it. But when he would just go into his little spurts of, what about the single mom? The single mom is staying up late doing homework with her son. What about the gun violence? I mean, they just throw everything at you because they're trying to spark an emotion somewhere. And this is the strategy. So I think, yes, it was apt of you to catch that. This is what they do. They've been doing it forever. And conservatives tend to fall into the trap often because we want to debate the issue honestly when the debate's never about the issue. It's just a show for who's watching the debate. And that's, rule number 1 of debating. Win the audience over. Number 2 is this point about Kamala Harris. I'm going to say this. During President Trump's time in office, there were times where they made the exact allegation against Trump. And it was, what is this guy on? What is he doing? Is he crashing off Adderall? They say it's Diet Coke, but he's probably hopped up on Adderall. They were saying, and then he's crashing on it, and he's all over the place. And it turned out in one of the instances, 2 of them that I can remember, one of them was a doctored video. It was AI made. They kind of slowed it down or sped it up or a little bit of both to make it sound like his speech was slurred. And it wasn't. It was just what they did. Kind of like an effect that they put on the video. In another one, it was actually him walking down the ramp with his leather-soled shoes and the ramp being very slippery after giving a speech in like 90-degree weather. And ultimately, they made that seem like Trump was messed up. He was on something, this and this and that. And the whole thing was fake, phony, and fraud. So I don't know the deal with Kamala, but I'm going to agree with you. It does seem like she's been a little off or frustrated or maybe had 1 many and went on TV. But I'm not going to go that far and say it. Text, shout out to you and KGYN. Folks, I'm coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night, your home for the best election coverage.
You know what I can say, Jim? I can say that 13,099 murderers were let into this country, 16,000 rapists, 425,000 people in the last 4 years have been let into this country by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's own Customs and Border Protection that are running around this country, Jim.
The other thing, too, it's Kamala Harris.
Crimes.
I don't know. Why do you guys say Kamala? That is, it's Kamala Harris.
Jim, we know that they're committing crimes against Americans. Why can't these individuals talk about the individuals who've been killed by illegal immigrants? 13,099 murderers have been let into this country by this administration's own accounting, and you guys don't want to talk about it.
So they're talking about one issue, and he says, don't call her Kamala, call her Kamala, or the other way around. This is what we're up against, my friends. This is it. Jim Acosta. What an idiot. Anyway, that was rude, right? I shouldn't call him an idiot. I should say how lacking in intellectual capacity. How about that? Okay, I'm being generous. Let us continue, amigos. Let's go to Don, Grass Valley, California, KNCO. What's up on the West Coast, Don?
Well, I was talking about the longshoreman strike and that guy Daggett and what he was saying about he was going to wreck all of us is what he was saying. And let's get some of those Haitian refugees and asylum seekers and some of the Venezuelan guys and the Guatemalans and the Nicaraguans down to the ports and hire them out as Joe Biden's strike breakers.
Well, I think, listen, I think a lot of people might take exception to that suggestion because they might say, you know what, we need to stop giving jobs to illegal aliens. And others would say, you know, we can't force people to work anywhere, right? We can only offer them the opportunity. But I think I get the gist of what you're saying. And instead of coming here to become a criminal and be, you know, to take over buildings and rape and rob and do these bad things, why don't you do something useful and become a scab, right? And work during a labor strike. I think the labor unions would hate that too. But ultimately, I get the point. We have an illegal immigration problem that we need to solve. And moreover, it's not the American dream immigration problem, at least from my perspective, right? There's always been people coming to this country illegally, visa overstays, people sneaking across the border, getting past the border patrol, etc., because they were escaping abject poverty in their country, and they wanted to do better here in America. But Don, what we're seeing now is not just people coming here for a better life, but people coming here with other ulterior motives and from many different parts of the world. And I would say by some measure, some of these people might be coming here with the intention of literally just changing the demographic makeup of the country so that we're no longer a majority this, that, or the other thing, right? Really kind of just controlling things. And I think they did the same thing in Germany probably a decade ago. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that, but I think that is part of it. But either way, I thank you for your thoughts on that. And that's Don in Grass Valley, California, KNCO. Going to get to the rest of your calls and more in the speed round. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks, it's a speed round. Keep your comments to the absolute minimum, 30 seconds or less, so that we can get everybody in. Let's go to Julie, Sacramento, California, streaming the show, richvaldez.com. Quickly, go right ahead.
Okay, you know what? I saw the show yesterday with J.D. Van.
Yes, the debate, sure.
He was so good. You wouldn't believe. He was good. He hit everything that we need to know. And the other guy... it was like he was cut by surprise, repeat. He was getting mad. He couldn't keep up and everything. And some people said he looked like some kind of cartoon. They named the cartoon name because he was getting really mad.
I agree with you, Julie. I think he got him off guard a couple of times. J.D. Vance clearly very prepared for the debate. And whether the CNN people say that he was unprepared or too prepared, either way, I think they're full of it. Fake, phony, and fraud. Let's go to Mark, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Go for it.
Yeah, hi, Rich. Hey, I'll be real quick. Climate change, that is definitely a hoax. And I'm going to tell you why here. There's a measurement in the air called parts per billion. Right now, the Earth is running around 437. This is CO2. Okay, you're familiar with the Golden Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age.
We got 8 seconds for you, Mark. 8 seconds. You're saying the parts per billion are not enough to constitute an increase where we actually have a crisis. I agree with you. Mark in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, thank you for your call. KDKA. Shout out to Frank in Evergreen, Joe on KSAR, Paul on KBFI, and everybody else that's on hold. Hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.